Even if they win all offense from the K, you're still going to vote affirmative because we're the only ones given an exact time frame and definition of the impacts in the rounds. Extend across the tickle card on the global warming flow. He says that by 2030 we're all going to die unless we reduce the amount of emissions that are emitted by 40%. And then because CO2 is causing a massive global warming that is doing things like melting the polar ice caps, which are in turn releasing more CO2, and that is then doing things like getting into the soil, which means that we're not able to grow enough plants to accurately feed the amount of people that we have in the world anymore, and that would eventually lead to mass extinction because of massive ecological collapse and degradation of the environment. And go on to the grid advantage. They only make these two arguments here. So first, group the two grid arguments. The second is that if we win the ontology debate, both these become irrelevant because the only impact of these is disrupting the social order. But the fact is that the first is that they give no impact to the disruption of the social order. There's no link between doing that and the alternative. And the second is that even if blackouts do disrupt the social order, the fact is that the fact is that Mormon in the 1AC says that they also lead to millions of deaths because we can't do things like refrigerate food anymore or create medicine to help starving people. And then extend across it's the fairy card that says that when these transformers go down due to a collapse and in a blackout, that they can stay down for as long as 6 months to a year. Then that will allow millions to die throughout the United States, and this will turn their ontology claims because the case says that. Because they say that we should prefer their ontology to, and in turn let millions of people die. That this is a lot less unethical than the affirmative. So we'll win that we're the most ethical ones in the round because we're actually trying to save the most number of lives in the people. And if anything, that'll turn their value to life claims because they value the lives of the people that are being hurt right now, and not the millions of people that could die in the future that have been proven unless we actually stop this. That'll also turn back their value to life claims, and that'll prove that the affirmative probably has a better ontology right now. But I'll get to the extinction debate on the K flow. On the bottom, they make this nanotech argument, but they conceded the analysis from the 1AR that these solar tech firms don't actually build nanotech. They only have panel divisions. Go on to the K flow. Go on to the counterplan flow. I'll just do the framework stuff here. It doesn't matter, even if they win all their arguments. That only means that they actually get to have the K in the round. So sure they can have their K, but the case impacts will still outweigh that. Go on to the K flow. At the very top, extend across the perm double bind. The fact is that if the alternative is that strong that it's able to do things like solve for all of global warming, that means it would probably be able to overcome this plan in this one instance. And if not, that means the alternative wouldn't be able to solve in the first place. It wouldn't be able to solve for their impacts, let alone for all of global warming in the first place. Which means that that's probably still a reason to vote at because we're solving for actual deaths in the status quo. But also extend across the Beals card right here. This is what's gonna win us the K flow debate. Beals says that. Fit is key to actually getting people reoriented and changing the way that they view nature. Because when we have things like a solar panel or a windmill in our backyard, that if I have that, I then become more in tune with the nature around me because I then play a role in creating the energy, and I am then joined into the energy sector around me. That will internally lead to a better appreciation of nature because we see how the process works and how we create the energy around us and how it affects the world that we live in. So that means that creates a more proactive society that appreciates the nature around us, and that exactly what that is exactly what the alternative calls for, is a more proactive society that accepts the being of the nature around us and rejects this technological thought. And even if they do still want to link to some form of technological thought, the fact is that the plan is a better form than the status quo, which is probably a reason why which is probably able to still check back against any of their links. Because even if we do some technological thought, the fact is that it's technological thought that allows for things like green technology to be created to solve for global warming. So that's not the bad kind that they cite. So if anything, the plan is reorientation of all their impacts that they cite in the first place. So if we win that with the first step, the fact that they give no alternative analysis in the 2NR of how to be able to solve things like global warming, that means that that's probably the reason why the perm would be able to solve in the first place. That they'd both be able to do it in unison. And even if they still win that the perm isn't able to solve that, the fact that it's a step in the right direction, that will probably check back against the links in the first place. And go on to the ontology debate. Even if they still win all the links, we'll win that on top. We'll win that. The plan will still outweigh this. So extend across the Robin card specifically. He says two things. First is that we actually need to have people on the planet before we can focus on ontology, because allowing things like extinction to happen is much worse because that favors the lives of the few that the K is wanting to save, or the lives of everyone on Earth. And the alternative would let everyone die by 2030, which is a lot more unethical than the 1AC they criticize. And then the second thing that he says that facing extinction is key to reorienting our politics in the first place, because when we when we face our mortality, that then leads people to reorient the way that we live, because we value life more so, and we see how bad it would be if we lost all life on Earth, and how valuable it is to have it here in the first place. That means that the ontology of the plan can then after we solve for things like global warming, can then take on new forms, and then take on the ontology of the case. So again, the plan is the plan is the first step ontologically of the alternative as well. And then go on to the bottom, they say that they make this global warming symptom argument. First, it doesn't matter. Cross my first step argument above that. That means that by solving for that means that we're solving for the symptoms, and then we'd be able to solve for the causes. And the second is that even if it is a symptom that it's going to kill us, you should probably prefer solving for a symptom that is a symptom in the first place. And on the bottom, they only make this ontology always extinction argument. Cross my Robin analysis from above about how you should prefer extinction first, because that would then lead to things like a changing of ontology. In the end of the round, there was no instance. They give no instance or no time frame of when their impacts are going to happen. You should prefer the solid, concrete impacts of the 1AC and the extinction scenario by 2030 over a very vague scenario and alternative.